It is.
Thanks for coming. I guess those are the only ones new here, but Jessica probably told you a little about it. What we're trying to do is, this might be a good time since there's not many of us to, for you all to let me know, not right now, but at some point, how I can improve the introduction. Because we're still formulating what the target audience is and that sort of thing. So let me know if I can create a formal introduction that's better and what I should include in that. But what we're trying to do is try and create a community for liberty-minded people to model after a church in a way that provides us with all the things that a church provides people: networking opportunities, just community support network, but it doesn't have that religious element to it. And today we're going to, Chris is going to do a reading, and Steve and Justin both have talks to give. One thing I wanted to mention, we handed out on the back of our programs last time quotes, and everybody had a different one, but the one I had was, "Liberty is the mother, not the daughter of order," by Pierre Joseph Proudhon. I wanted to bring that up because it reminded me of Jane Jacobs, who wrote about order from disorder in the life and death of great American cities. She criticized the form of urban planning that was very prescriptive, that told people, that directed the way everything was built, and the way everything was reorganized, and a lot of times put a lot of people out of their houses. And she criticized that by saying, talking about how the greatest order came from no planning, from disorder. And her analogy was, she described it as an intricate ballet in which the individual dancers and ensembles all have distinctive parts which miraculously reinforce each other and comprise an orderly whole. That's what that quote reminded me of. It's a concept, it's order from disorder, that has been observed for at least a couple hundred years, that is still completely rejected. And I bring it up because we see it now. We see it with, in DC, there's a stadium being planned, another one in Southwest. And I'm sure if you dig deep, there's people being affected that are basically being kind of being screwed. So I know it happened with the other DC stadium, and it's happening in a lot of places now. I think we have on the program to do a meet and greet first this time. We didn't do it first before, but we all kind of know each other except for you guys. So
You introduce yourself so she knows.
what's that?
We're still going to do the greet
Go
your
ahead.
neighbor
Yeah.
later. So
What's that?
we're going to do the greet your neighbor.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I confused that. So,
All right. Good. So, like Gavin said, I'm going to do a reading today. It's important to note that while most churches are organized around sacred texts, ours is not organized around sacred texts. But we do have people who inspire us, people who have contributed to our worldview. There's a lot of different thinkers who have contributed to our worldview. So from time to time, we like to read passages from them. Today I'm going to read from the classic Road to Serfdom by F.A. Hayek. If you don't know who he is, he's an economist, 20th century economist, and he wrote the Road to Serfdom in 1944, so during World War II, when he was observing a path that we were going down where war led led to central planning, and people looked at that central planning as sort of the path of the future. So he wrote the book as a warning to people whose governments were going down that road, because he called it the road to serfdom. So I'm going to read a slightly modified version of a passage that he wrote about increased government control and the dynamics of power. So, in order to achieve their ends, the planners create power over men wielded by other men. Their success will depend on the extent to which they achieve such power. Success is in quotations. Many of these planners have the tragic illusion that by depriving private individuals of the power they possess in an individualist system and transferring this power to society, that is to the state, they thereby extinguish power. What they overlook is that by concentrating power so that it can be used in the service of a single plan, it is not merely transformed but infinitely heightened. By uniting in the hands of some single body, power formerly exercised independently by many, an amount of power is created infinitely greater than any that existed before, so much more far-reaching as almost to be of a different kind. It is a fallacy to argue that the great power exercised by a central planning board would be no greater than the power collectively exercised by private boards of directors. There is, in a competitive society, nobody can exercise even a fraction of the power which a planning board would possess. A decentralized power is to reduce the absolute amount of power, and the competitive system is the only system designed to minimize the power exercised by man over man. We can seriously doubt the power of, say, a millionaire who may be my employer has over me is very much less than that which the smallest bureaucrat who wields the coercive power of the state and on whose discretion it depends how I'm allowed to live and work. Our generation has forgotten that the system of private property is the most important guarantee of freedom. It is only because the control of the means of production is divided among many people acting independently that we as individuals can decide what to do with ourselves. When all the means of production are vested in a single hand, whether it be nominally that of society as a whole or that of a dictator, whoever exercises control has complete power over us. And when economic power is centralized as an instrument of political power, it creates a degree of dependence scarcely distinguishable from slavery. So I hope you enjoyed that excerpt from Road to Serfdom. So moving on, we're next going to do, as Gavin said, reach your neighbor. So everyone stand up, just say hello to everyone, especially if you haven't met that person. One new person. Good to meet you.
Hi again.
Just how you doing? Not too bad.
Did you go to the march?
No, but I rode the metro with other people going to work.
Okay.
And I've got a funny bottom. It's very funny.
How the pups?
Yeah.
So they're busting
First two
in.
bands are doing.
I don't know. And they're all African
Need to
American.
speak.
As was almost everybody on the train. Everybody got off the march.
You know, we used to in early years, but now.
So it could be with SEI and just passed out the t-shirts.
Yeah,
But
Oh, so you're
I've
gonna
seen
do-
marches come out before where I literally saw, you know, the SEIU building is at 8th in Massachusetts. I've actually seen
You do though, you don't want people.
people,
So,
there was something they were protesting about some business group that was being the Ritz-Carlton. I actually saw them
They clamored.
marching down the street from
Yeah.
the Ritz-Carlton, from the 18th and Mass area. And they marched around the Ritz-Carlton in circles for a while. But it was clearly like, they all had on the same t-shirt, and they all came from the same direction. It was basically just like the building, and once they said, okay, everybody, for your lunch hour.
We were just talking.
Well, you always see like people
Yeah.
protesting outside for unions. They're all bums, you know.
Oh,
You tell them in a cage, you know.
Yeah.
They pay them, they don't pay them.
Fair
They
facts. But
you usually find that they have a Craigslist where they hire. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Or when they protest CPAC.
I didn't know where.
They
It wasn't bad.
people
It's
off Craigslist, and in fact,
And then it's so toxic.
an Occupy group protested CPAC.
Such mass.
And it turned out that the accountant for the local DC Occupy group is a Ron Paul supporter. So nobody can do math. So,
They're trying to
I'm
start
trying to
they
follow
started
that.
trying
so there are local people who are active in the local Occupy DC group.
And they're
2 years ago.
they're protesting.
Well, in
Yeah.
Occupy DC was part of the group that protested at CPAC when it was in Woodley Park 2 years ago. And some CPAC people, including some Ron Paul CPAC people,
Because big water, you have to
were in one of the bars in Woodley Park, and they met the guy who's the accountant for Occupy DC, and he confirmed that they were paying less than minimum wage and that they hired people from Craigslist. There was something else funny he told me. Oh, they ran into some people who actually were hired at Craigslist, and they were complaining because they weren't being paid on that. Like, they weren't paid like they thought they were going to be, and they weren't paid on time. Yeah.
They had
I don't know, I was thinking about making that.
that.
MLK was a socialist sign and marching, but
Oh, I tweeted one.
yeah, it's not right.
Oh, you saw what I tweeted?
Yeah, I was like, this
I'm
guy.
gonna go find it.
One person retweeted, I don't know, somebody called Northwest DC Spook, that was tweeting things about the march, like, you know, they were going to the march, they retweeted the thing that I said about, I hope you give some thought to the fact that the leaders you support,
I think they're
you
kind
know,
of
they
working on how to
like
do that.
unemployment and dropout rates are actually higher.
It's gotta be some-
And they were doing that, so maybe they thought, yeah, you're right, we should.
But it's actually currently the same
Great-
thing like
great society is the worst thing for the
American
American community.
And in other words, so they're trying to put the stuff.
That's actually why, you know, I'm going back to
Yeah.
that's actually why I'm going back, part of the reason.
And you don't want to put that stuff.
I actually want to write something on, I want to write criticism, like a book link. Maybe even just have it be my own
Do
age
you work
prayer.
locally?
I want to write full-length attacks on the whole, only on this one topic, on the whole set of civil rights and fair housing laws and how they don't do what people think they do. Including that everyone sort of worships them and doesn't realize that there are all these problems that still exist that they're obviously not thinking about. Like, schools are still saying that.
Oh, and the prisons, basically.
Well, and they don't work and they're worse than they used to be.
Yeah.
But
So
so,
worshiping the intention, it's not worshiping the outcome, you know?
right, and
That's
because
the
you
problem.
worship the intention and
You
attack
attack
anyone who
anything
criticizes it, you never do anything about the outcome. But it also has all these other little weird parts, which I've gotten to experience directly, and they're like minor things in a way, except I'm curious about how many of them there are and what the total cost is. So like, I just actually, this year, I usually don't help people rent things, but this year I helped Ryan Salmon, I don't know if you can imagine, he's the chair of the DCLP. He's an undergraduate at AU. I helped him and his group of friends rent this house here at AU. So now they've got a big, kind of torn down house with a gigantic fenced-in backyard, and it's only a couple blocks from the Kellytown Metro. And I know Ryan's gonna be away not this summer, but next summer, but basically he's got this house. I think they're gonna lease it for more than 1 year. It has a huge backyard, so like, he does have roommates. I mean, he's chair of the DCLP. I mean, if you want to have like huge barbecues, actually in DC, I mean, they've got the perfect setup. Like it's close to a metro. It's like a block off Wisconsin Avenue. It's near, you know. Anyway, I may point that out to him.
It's the same thing though.
Anyway, so then he referred these kind of like two groups of people who barely knew to me to help them find houses. And then I got this other group that was sort of graduate students that Gavin works at American Spectator. And I already knew this, but nobody in DC likes to rent to students. But DC's fair housing law is more extensive than federal. It's 26 protected classes, so DC, it's illegal. Yeah, so it's Montgomery County, but they're not the exact same. Virginia only has like 7 or 8 or 9. It only has a couple more than the federal. So in DC, you can't discriminate against people based on, which means you can't ask for any information about these categories. That's what discrimination is. It's sexual orientation, personal appearance, source of income, political affiliation, matriculation, political affiliation. Yeah, that one actually I think almost makes sense in DC. So you can't refuse to rent to somebody because they're either Republican or Democrat or Libertarian or whatever. And I can see that could have been a problem in DC, like maybe on Capitol Hill. I mean, I'm still against it, but that one I actually am more for than all the rest, because mainly it fucks with people who are like, when you do it part of hello, you know, I mean, I might want to not rent to somebody. Anyway,
is, the person just.
But then there's
That's why-
matriculation, so you
that's why
can't
I
put
think
people down based
Yeah,
on
sure, yeah.
whether they're in school,
No, not
what
at
school
all.
they went to, what they studied.
Wow.
So, there are all these people who are rent houses, apartments, and groups of students always show up and want to rent them. And they do in fact have parents who will pay for it. And nobody has to deal with them because students are noisy or they have certain neighbors that tear things up.
But I mean, it was still.
And also,
he did have a couple of-
like if they're late on their rent, like you have to trace them around, you have to chase their parents around, there are all these people. So,
Finding Tennessee where they can shoot back.
right. So what they now start doing is there are all these houses that are for rent, like all the houses in Navy Park, and they'll just say,
She knows more than me.
they can't say no students. So what they say is no out-of-boundary cosigners. Meaning if somebody's co-signing the lease, they can't no students.
All right, let's get started.
So, but the result is I should these people all these houses.
Okay, so next up we've got Steve, who's going to give us a little bit of chat. It's called Two Options, Anarchy or World Gov. So, Steve, have at it.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, well, let's do something before I get into my speech. Let's just take a moment. And, you know, the week's over. We've got the whole weekend in front of us. We all came out this morning. And let's just take a moment. Everyone, maybe close your eyes and think about what we're doing here. You know, liberty in a vacuum, if you believe it doesn't really, you can't really accomplish much. It doesn't mean anything if it's just you. But when we get together, we can actually make something happen. And so let's just take a moment of reflection to think about how great it is that we're starting this community around such an important value. Okay, well, let me get into my topic then. What I'd like to talk about today is world government. Is world government a possibility, and is that the direction that we're going? Now, the first thing that comes to mind a lot of times when you bring up the topic of world government to many people is conspiracy. And so what I'd like to do to start off is take a couple minutes and elaborate some ideas I have about conspiracies in general. And then when I'm done with that, I'll go back and get to the main topic of world government and argue that there is a movement to world government, whether you call it a conspiracy or not. And then I'll try to show the logic of the reason that people want world government, why they are trying to take us in that direction. And then just emphasize about why we want to try and prevent that from happening, and talk about how that relates to our own political philosophy. So, starting off with conspiracies. Many people, whenever you have an idea or a theory about something that might be going on that seems somewhat conspiratorial, they will have a knee-jerk reaction and sort of automatically out of hand reject that this could be happening. And to the extent that people have that reaction, I think that's dangerous, because to the extent that we think conspiracies can't happen, we are creating a situation where if everyone starts thinking that way, the few who are in power, if they do choose to conspire against us, can get away with it because there's no one calling them out, there's no one anticipating it. The lessons of history are clear. Conspiracies do exist. The classic one for those of us who study liberty is the foundation of the Federal Reserve. And that legislation passed Congress in 1913. The legislation was formed, though, a couple of years before, when the heads of the banking syndicates at the time met in a secret meeting in Jekyll Island, Georgia. They went disguised, they hid their intentions, and at that meeting, they planned out what eventually the terms of the central bank would look like, what the legislation would actually look like. But they also planned the campaign of misinformation that they would use to mislead the public about who was behind the legislation and what its intentions were. And they were successful, and we are still dealing now, more than 100 years later, with the consequence of that successful conspiracy. But the foundation of the Federal Reserve is not an isolated, a unique instance. There are other examples of conspiracies we know about in history. The Glorious Revolution in England in 1688 was a conspiracy. The French Revolution, many people say, was also a conspiracy. There's evidence of that, although most history books still write it as sort of a spontaneous uprising. And we know that Hitler and the Nazis burned their own Reichstag in 1933, which was their Capitol building, in order to usher in martial law. And Hitler gave voice to this tendency of people to ignore the possibility that conspiracies could exist when he famously made the statement that you can't deceive people on small things, but they'll let you get away with the big lies. And he goes on in that passage to talk about how most people have a very simple way of dealing and are not really sophisticated politically, and they engage in small lies. They're anticipating them, but they do not anticipate that, or they don't think about great conspiracies, and so they're not thinking that other people might be doing it. So I guess what I'm trying to say about all this is, don't disable that faculty of your imagination that allows you to imagine what kinds of things might be going on. It's important for our survival that we consider it. Now, that being said, there are obviously a lot of bad ideas a lot of bad conspiracies out there. So you have to be critical, and you have to, most conspiracies you hear about are pretty much, you can reject out of hand. So bring some critical and skepticism about conspiracies you hear, but give them their day in court is all I'm saying. I personally am very interested in conspiracies, conspiracy theories. I always like to read about them, and almost all of them I reject out of hand. But see, because for me at least, a conspiracy is something where people are planning something that's going to affect you, but they don't want you to know about it. And the truths that I want to discover about the world are not things that have been pre-packaged, pre-digested, put in front of me for someone wants me to take. But the truths that I want to discover about the world are the ones that people are trying to hide from me, because those are the ones that are more important for my survival, I think. And that's what conspiracy is. So that's sort of a spiel on conspiracy, which the main takeaway is just keep an open mind to some of this stuff. Now going to world government. Is there a conspiracy to bring about world government? I don't know if I would use the word conspiracy. I think there's a movement to take us to world government. I don't think there's 6 guys, evil guys meeting in a dark room once a year trying to bring us to world government. I would say there's a consensus that many have reached at the highest levels of power, that world government will solve some of the problems that the world faces, but they know it's a hot-button issue. They know that many people have an emotional attachment to national sovereignty, so they don't come out and say, we want world government, because they know that would discredit them. But instead what they do is they're working behind the scenes to move us in the direction of world government. And if you look at what's going on geopolitically, you can see that could be a reason why some things are happening. Whether it is or not, is not, obviously we're not for sure. But I think the idea is to move us in such a direction until eventually a crisis happens, something precipitates a necessary change, and it's world government's presented as an option, and we're not given an alternate choice. And then they can come from the shadows, and it's a fait accompli at that point. Now, I hear you thinking, well, who exactly is in this conspiracy? And that's kind of why I'm not calling it a conspiracy, because it's not people we're fighting against necessarily. There are groups, there are individuals that I could name that I think it's more obvious that they're trying to push this. but it's an idea that we're fighting against. This is, the idea of world government has existed in its modern form for a long time, it's many generations. So, broadly speaking, who I'm talking about are those, like I said, the highest levels of power, the ultra elite, the elite in the political system, military, and executives of companies, even religious leaders. Those are, broadly speaking, now of course there are differences within each individuals, but broadly speaking, those are the real power brokers in the world. Now you might be saying, okay, well, but why do they want world government? What you said that they see it as a solution. What is that? Let me start by saying that let me start by saying what I don't think, why I don't think they want world government. I don't think they want world government because they hate humanity, that they hate beauty, that they want to enslave us all, that they want to kill us all. Many in the conspiracy movement paint this very negative caricature of people who want world government, and I don't think that's accurate. I don't think it's helpful. I think what is going on is these are good people. They have good intentions, but they have bad ideas. And history shows us that good intentions combined with bad ideas lead people to justify the most unbelievable brutalities because they think it's a means to an end. That's what the Communist Revolution is all about. Well, we'll do this now, and then it'll bring us utopia. So, good intentions. They have good intentions. We have good intentions. In fact, one of the reasons I think they're trying to create this world government is to solve a problem that we really want solved. It's one of arguably the biggest problem the human race faces, which is the problem of war. No right-thinking person that cares about the future, cares about the world, wants to make the world a better place, who has even a superficial understanding of history, can do anything but be offended when they read about war, when they think about this phenomenon. It's completely wasteful. It makes no sense. It's completely illogical. I mean, just looking at war abstractly, thousands of people line up on an imaginary line. They don't know each other, and they kill each other. It makes no sense. So a person with good intentions sees that, and the first instinct is, how do we stop this from happening? Now, how you do that is you first diagnose what causes it, and then you propose a solution. And how you do those two things depends on your philosophy. Those of us who believe in liberty, for example, we have a diagnosis for what causes war, and we have a proposed solution. Our diagnosis for what causes war is concentrations of power. If you give one person or a small group of people control over millions, and if there's no consequence to them, if everyone goes to war, of course they're going to go to war for whatever superficial reasons, for vanity, so they can be written in pages of history, for conquest, for narrow self-interest. It's not going to affect them anyway. And then the rest of us have to prosecute the war, pay for the war, potentially die for this. So it's a concentration of power. So we say, don't give anyone that kind of power. Split it up. So you could imagine a world where the U.S., they didn't even have a central government. We had state governments. And we were all ruled by our own state government. Two states go to war. Missouri and Illinois go to war with each other. But it doesn't happen here in Virginia. It doesn't even affect us. The only thing we notice is maybe corn prices go up. And we can voluntarily get involved in that if we want, but aside from that, it's just them. Or you can push the principle of liberty further and say, imagine we're all ruled by city-states, so there's no actual state government. Two cities could go to war. Columbia, Maryland, and Gaithersburg, Maryland could go to war, and even us, just a few miles away, are not affected by it. Or if you take it to its logical conclusion, which is the position of the church. Our church, you say all coercive government is illegitimate, then you might have a situation where two individuals or small groups go to war. These could be people living at the end of your street, and it doesn't even affect your dinner, because unless you want to voluntarily get involved, they're going to war with themselves, and that's it. So our solution to war is break up power, and it doesn't eliminate war, but it isolates it and minimizes it to such an extent that in effect it's eliminated. But that's because we believe in liberty. We're skeptical of government. We don't think government solves things. But unfortunately, we are, that opinion is not the majority. Many people do think government can solve things. And many people in the city have that philosophy. I mean, if you talk to somebody who works, who's in the government, and a politician, you are never going to convince them that government is not a force for good. Imagine someone who spent 30 years